So today on the podcast, we look at the future of the Disney company, particularly how changes in upper management might shift the company's future direction and priorities. Bob Iger first tried to retire from his role as CEO in 2020, leaving the company in the hands of Bob Chapek, a person whose previous experience was most heavily tied to consumer products, though Chapek also had executive experience with the parks and resorts. That transition ended poorly, in large part because Chapek was unprepared to handle the new streaming service, the development of the parks, and also the various Disney-owned studios as audiences shifted away from traditional cinema experiences. And that the pandemic started a few weeks after he was put in charge didn't help either. And so now we take a look at what the 2.0 version of Bob Iger's retirement will look like and what that means for the future of Disney. As you probably know, the leadership of Disney has been at a crossroads for the past year. Current CEO Bob Iger's contract ends on December 31st of this year, but for the past couple of weeks he's been hinting at an early retirement. News about this leaked out slowly. On January 30th, the first bit came out publicly when the Wall Street Journal reported, and here I'm going to quote, Iger now plans to step down as CEO and pull back from daily management before December 31st. Iger indicated that he'd like to spend more time with his family and also spend more energy on other things such as sailing. Iger recently purchased a 213-foot luxury yacht called the Aquarius II, which replaces his previous yacht, the Aquarius I. The new boat was built especially for him. It's roughly 6,000 square feet. The boat is large enough that it takes a crew of 9 to operate it. I was able to look up its price. It's $45 million, which coincidentally is roughly equivalent to Iger's total compensation package for 2025. If nothing else, this contextualizes that CEO selections are high-cost, high-stakes endeavors for major companies like Disney. Not to dwell on this too much, but that is an absolutely staggering sum for a compensation package, and some of that is deserved based on the way he expanded value in the company. I just have a personal problem with anyone making that high of a salary in a single year. But if I were to look at this from another perspective, such as, is it worth an additional $21 million to have Iger instead of Chapek? Chapek made about $24 million during his final year. Maybe I can see significant corporate value in that. In his initial run, Iger had one of the most successful terms as CEO for Disney, lasting 15 years from 2005 to 2020. His three most lasting contributions to the Disney company from this first period are these. First, he expanded the company's franchise portfolio by purchasing Pixar, Marvel, Lucasfilm, and 20th Century Fox. Second, he launched Disney Plus and arranged the company's streaming strategy so that Disney Plus emerged as one of the top streamers in the world. And third, he moved Disney parks firmly into China with the opening of Shanghai Disneyland. Then, just as the pandemic was starting and just as the streamer was in its early months, he handed the position off to Bob Chapek. We've talked here on the podcast previously about the specific problems associated with Chapek's time as CEO, so there's probably no use in repeating all that here, but basically, under Chapek's leadership, the streamer lost billions, and the parks were placed into a position where little was being developed for them to drive attendance between 2025 and 2027, which are some of the big problems we're seeing play out right now. With the leak that Iger might step down early, a board meeting was planned for the first week of February to decide on his successor. At this time, there were two primary candidates, Josh D'Amaro and Dana Walden. The key differences between them were these. Though Josh D'Amaro started in consumer products back in the late 1990s, he quickly switched over to what is now called experiences and has spent time managing individual parks, individual resorts, and ultimately the entire experiences division, which includes the parks, resorts, the cruise line, and Adventures by Disney. His big liability was that he had little direct involvement with Disney's film, TV, and streaming businesses. He's been with Disney for over 25 years and has a deep knowledge of the company and its traditions. He's generally seen as a Disney person. Dana Walden, on the other hand, arrived at Disney in 2019 with the Fox merger. At Fox, she had served as the chairman and CEO of the Fox Television Group. At Disney, she started as chairman of Disney Television Studios and ABC Entertainment and was later promoted to co-chairman of Disney Entertainment, where she oversaw streaming and Disney's linear channels such as ABC, FX, and so on, with the exception of ESPN, which was in its own division. Her main limitation was that she had no experience managing parks, resorts, the cruise line, and Adventures by Disney. She is viewed mostly as a general TV executive with a background at Fox, where she developed shows that don't neatly fit into the Disney brand, such as Family Guy, Empire, and Sons of Anarchy, while DeMauro is deeply tied to Disney's overall brand image. So in this, there were two individuals with different areas of expertise, with neither having deep management training in both the entertainment and experiences side of the company. For months now, we have suggested that Josh DeMauro, as he's tied to the company's most profitable divisions, was the front-runner for the CEO position. In my opinion, his chances improved last fall, after the temporary suspension of the Jimmy Kimmel Live show, which led to millions of people canceling their Hulu and Disney Plus subscriptions in protest. The exact number of cancellations that were the direct result of this situation is sort of hard to pin down. But Disney Plus and Hulu both had roughly double the usual rate of churn or subscription cancellations in the weeks immediately following the Kimmel incident. Hulu, where Jimmy Kimmel streams, had 4.1 million cancellations following the incident. Disney Plus had 3 million. About half of that is what these streamers would have seen in churn in a typical month. So the total subscriber losses here that are directly attributable to the Kimmel incident is about 3.5 million subscribers, a huge number. Assuming all 3.5 million accounts remain canceled and using a figure that averages out the cost of these subscriptions, this is somewhere around a $500 million reduction in revenue for the year. We talked about how these cancellations happened in detail about 5 months ago on this podcast, but to sum it up quickly, initially some right-leaning viewers canceled their subscriptions based on what Jimmy Kimmel said. This was likely outside of management's control, but far more left-leaning viewers canceled based on how Disney as a company reacted. This messaging was under Dana Walden's control and in retrospect might have been handled in a way that lessened revenue damage to the streaming division. And these errors here gave a slight boost to DeMauro's chance to be CEO. Another point that we felt suggested that Josh DeMauro would be the more likely choice for CEO is how we see the future of the Disney company overall and where its deep profit centers will lie in the near future. The division that Walden oversees are important, but deliver less profit than those divisions tied to experiences that DeMauro oversees. To put it simply, some of the areas that Dana Walden covers, such as linear TV and film, are shrinking markets, and also streaming still struggles to produce profits, while DeMauro's experiences portfolio, which includes the resorts and the cruise line, are areas of growth. Presently, 60% of Disney's profit, along with 80% of the company's overall value, come from areas that DeMauro oversees and has experience with. But again, there's a downside here. which is why this was always going to be a difficult decision for the board of directors. In the world of film and streaming, DeMauro was always seen as a person who works primarily with theme parks, and this could be a big liability when Disney gets into difficult public disputes concerning top-level talent, such as what happened with Scarlett Johansson over compensation from Black Widow, or the public backlash around Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot, along with their political views on the Middle East during the release of the live-action version of Snow White. There are clearly upcoming issues with AI and film development, and also the partial migration of the film audience from theaters to streaming and videos on social media that Walden would have more experience in managing. These were the reasons that last fall I suggested that DeMauro was the more likely candidate. I did see a small chance that the outcome might produce two CEOs, especially as both Josh and Dana understand entirely different areas of the Disney company. In recent years, the idea of co-CEOs has become a little more common in media companies. Netflix, Comcast, and Spotify have all had co-CEOs in recent years. But this has not been part of the Disney company's traditions. Disney didn't use the term CEO for leadership during Walt's lifetime, but essentially Walt held that role. Disney started using the term CEO after Walt's passing, and since that time there has been only a single CEO at a time. So I felt that despite the limitations here, Disney would likely pick one person to be CEO, as Disney, if nothing else, is a company that is deeply prone to working inside of its own traditions. With the leak that the board would meet in early February to vote on Iger's successor, the betting sites and odds markets saw the outcome as roughly 7-2 in Josh DeMauro's favor. Or to break that down, odds markets saw a roughly 86% probability of DeMauro being named the next CEO. Wall Street analysts mostly had DeMauro pegged as the next CEO as well, in part because he had a far longer tenure at Disney than did Walden. From people I know inside the company, I generally saw that those on the film and TV side were pulling for Walden. Those on the resorts and cruise line side were pulling for DeMauro. It was generally believed that a CEO with experience in their division would give them an advantage, even if that only came from the new CEO having a deep understanding of the challenges that those divisions faced and the budgets they'd need to overcome them. Or to put this simply, many inside the company saw a DeMauro CEO-ship, suggesting that parks and the cruise line would be slightly more central to the future of the Disney company, and a Walden CEO-ship would mean the same for film, TV, and streaming. Initially, I thought the announcement of the new CEO would come out on the same day as the February 2nd earnings call, but that didn't happen. Instead, it came out the next day, February 3rd. Disney arranged a reasonably elegant solution, giving both DeMauro and Walden promotions. DeMauro, as expected, did become CEO, and Walden became both president and chief creative officer of the company. They will both be powerful people at Disney, but there are clear distinctions between their roles. Some of the press photos that accompanied the announcement are staged to suggest a partnership, and this ideally should be a type of partnership, but there's a clear hierarchy within that partnership as well. So let's break some of that down. Josh DeMauro will be the top company executive who will manage Disney's overall vision, strategies, and budget priorities. He will have final say on policy across all areas of the company. Starting in late March, he will become a member of Disney's board of directors. DeMauro will ultimately be responsible for the overall success or failure of the company. Dana Walden, on the other hand, as president and CCO, which are significant positions, will report to Josh DeMauro directly. She will lead the creative direction of the company, particularly in film, TV, and streaming, and she will oversee the artistic and storytelling output for the entire company, which is an essential center in the Disney organization. But her executive vision will be placed inside of a scope that is agreed to by tomorrow. Her executive leadership will likely be felt most in the creative output of film, streaming, and TV. She will likely oversee brand management, specifically in how Disney uses its IP assets in various ways. At least initially, she will not be on the board of directors, though it's possible that at a later date the board might vote to include her. It's not common for a CCO to be on the board of most companies, but Disney may eventually see the CCO as so central to the future of the company to invite her to join. Dana Walden's largest challenge, as I see it, is to develop both existing franchises and to start new ones. In terms of theatrical releases, Star Wars and Marvel have sputtered out in the last few years and need to be revived. Pixar, too, has had some misses. But overall, Disney as a company for about the last 10 years has relied on sequels and live-action remakes. In the last 5 or 6 years, the only film that introduced new characters from Disney that might be considered foundational, that is, as a film property that then inspires rides, a deep and lasting line of merchandise, and later sequels, is Encanto. Developing new franchise properties like this and rehabilitating the Star Wars and Marvel lines will likely be her biggest challenge. In all this, Disney is moving into new ground. In decades past, individual divisions at Disney have had chief creative officers, but their power was isolated to only 1 or 2 areas of the company. For example, John Lasseter was the CCO for both Disney Animation and Pixar, but his direct power as CCO was limited to these 2 areas. Dana Walden will be a corporate-level CCO, which is an entirely new executive role at the Disney company. Her role will not be limited to 1 or 2 divisions, but she will have wide creative oversight of creative decisions as they affect the entire company. In part, this reflects how much Disney values her abilities and how deeply they see storytelling, largely through visual mediums, as central to the company's future. The elevation of Dana Walden to CCO is also a way to keep her inside of Disney, as it's relatively common for CEO candidates to leave a company if they aren't chosen for the top role. So this is another upside here, keeping 2 key executives by promoting both of them. How I've seen this fall out in terms of reactions inside the company looks a little like this. Most people I know in the parks and resort areas are happy to see Demaro as CEO. And the people I know in entertainment aren't as excited, but also see that they have a defender of their division in the new corporate-level CCO position, which will be among the most influential roles at the entire company and perhaps be eventually viewed as the number 2 spot, though generally corporate structures place the CEO as the most important figure at a company, with a few others like the CCO, the CFO, and so on, having largely equitable roles just below them. Regardless of all this, Dana Walden, at least initially, will probably be one of the 3 or 4 most powerful people in the Disney company and will be the person who primarily oversees film and TV output, which is also her strength area. And that generally is how this week ended up. And now for a short overview of who Josh D'Amaro is and what his background might suggest for the future of the Disney company. Typically, executives wishing to be CEO should manage their personal information online and in other public settings. The general rule of thumb here: is that people wishing to be CEO release less information than those on the internet would like, and more than needed by the board of directors, as the board of directors is the body that ultimately hires them. So generally, candidates in this position will talk about their professional track record, their general values, and maybe a few positive family stories. Oversharing or establishing an image as a person with interests far outside the company is often viewed as a problem. So mostly what candidates here talk about is their experience with and vision for the company. But also, undersharing is an issue as well. 6 years ago when Bob Chapek took over the company, I put together a similar personality overview for him. And in doing that back then, the oddest thing that I found was that he, or more likely a company that he had hired, had completely scrubbed public records as they related to him to the point that I could not find his birth date, his birth year, or even his exact age. And having written multiple books focused on entertainment history, I am pretty good at finding avenues to locate information on public figures. But this information for Bob Chapek simply wasn't there. I finally located some of Chapek's high school materials, and from that I was able to guesstimate his rough birth year. The complete lack of basic information on Chapek back in 2020 probably should have been a sign that we were moving into unusual space with that new Disney CEO. Josh D'Amaro, on the other hand, has been somewhat guarded with his personal information, but nowhere near as guarded as Chapek. And this trend always confuses me a little with a company like Disney. In large part, the Disney company developed its identity because of how inviting and personal Walt was with the public, particularly in his filmed appearances for his TV show. For a while, back in the 80s, Michael Eisner tried to do this as well, with talks in public and on TV, but he really didn't have Walt's warmth and charm. But after Eisner, subsequent Disney CEOs have followed a more contemporary mode in how guarded they are with personal information. Essentially, from business seminars or business schools, future CEOs have been told that relatability can fade over time and even become a liability, while a focus on achievement and credibility as a leader has more lasting value. In my opinion, I'm not sure that this is the best mode for Disney as a company with a unique history and a personality-focused fan base, but that's generally where we are now in 2026, 60 years after Walt's passing. A modern CEO, when talking to the press, might talk a little about their life if it helped establish their leadership abilities and furthered company goals. Whereas Walt, back in the 50s and 60s, talked about his life to relate to people and to satisfy their curiosity about him. And honestly, I miss that model and think it's a stronger one for a company that tries to get customers to relate to their characters, their stories, and their parks. But that's really just not where we are right now in the world of business. I've talked with Josh D'Amaro a few times at various events over the years. He always strikes me as a likable, enthusiastic person, but also somewhat guarded, which is typical for modern executives at major companies. And so now, so that you might have a stronger sense of who he is as a person, I've tried to piece together a bio that presents him more as an individual than as a business executive. And so here we go. Josh D'Amaro shares a birthday, which is February 10th, with Bob Iger, though of course D'Amaro is 20 years younger than the current Disney CEO. D'Amaro was born in Massachusetts in 1971, about 9 months before Disney World opened in Florida. In high school, D'Amaro was involved in sports and had the nickname Chief. In his senior year, which was 1989, he was voted Best Dressed. He played soccer and basketball. He was number 20 on the hardwood court. Even though he is only 5'9", he played varsity basketball, and during his senior year, he was invited to play in the Tri-Valley All-Star Game. In a recent interview, he reflected on this experience from over 35 years ago. "I will admit I felt a little out of place because these were the best of the best," he said. "Many of the other players were headed off to play at the collegiate level, including one at Boston College. I figured someone must have gotten sick and dropped out, so they called me up." DeMauro ended up having such a good game that his teammates lifted him onto their shoulders and carried him off the court at the end of the match. He saw it as a lesson about pushing yourself beyond your perceived limitations to new levels of accomplishment. From high school, he initially went to college in studio art. He studied painting and sculpture at Skidmore College in New York. At the end of his sophomore year, he found himself working on a 12-foot-tall metal sculpture, worried about how he would be able to support his future family if he remained an artist. The metal sculpture he was working on at that time was human form, a figure reaching up toward the sky, a piece that remained on the Skidmore campus for years after he left. As a junior, he transferred to Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., with a more practical goal, to study business administration. 2 years later, he graduated with a business degree. He married Susan, a woman he had known since high school. His first professional roles weren't with Disney or even in entertainment. He began his career working in the finance division of the Gillette Company, whose headquarters were about 30 miles from where he had grown up. 5 years later, though, he was hired by Disney. In his initial years, he held many mid-level management positions. These included Vice President of Sales and Travel Trade Marketing and Director of Business Planning and Strategy Development. In 2005, he became the financial officer for the licensing arm of Disney Consumer Products. But then he began to shift his career over to the experiences side of the company. Experiences, even back in the early 2000s, was the part of the company that was clearly primed for growth. In 2010, he became vice president of the relatively new Adventures by Disney division. 5 years earlier, Adventures by Disney had started with just 2 destinations, Hawaii and Wyoming. And when DeMauro arrived, they had 25, including international destinations, mostly in Europe. In 2013, Josh shifted from overseeing Adventures by Disney's package tours to becoming vice president in charge of Animal Kingdom in Florida. The following year, August of 2014, he left Animal Kingdom to become senior vice president of the Walt Disney World Resort. 4 years later, in 2018, Josh returned to the West Coast to become president of the Disneyland Resort in California. He stepped into that role to find a number of complex problems. First, due to a wave of new council members in Anaheim, Disney's relationship with the city was on the wane. The city wanted to rein in Disney's growth. Disputes with the city led to a cancellation of a proposed 700-room luxury hotel around downtown Disney. The reason behind the cancellation was this. 2 years earlier, with different members on Anaheim City Council, the city had agreed to a $267 million tax rebate for a hotel on the western edge of the downtown Disney District area. When Disney wanted to move the construction site to the northern edge of the same area, about 1,000 feet from where the complex was originally proposed, the city used that opportunity to claim the shift in location would void the terms of the tax agreement. 2018 was also the year in which cast members threatened to strike unless pay was increased to a living wage, an issue that often made national headlines. The issue quickly became divisive. Local unions had collected enough signatures to have a November ballot measure called Measure L, requiring any business receiving city subsidies to pay workers a minimum of $15 per hour, up from the then current minimum wage in Anaheim of $11. Disney's initial approach to this issue was to declare that they would no longer accept tax subsidies from the city, an approach that was later overturned by courts based on a set of long-standing tax agreements between the city and Disney. Neither of these issues played well with the public, but the cancellation of the luxury hotel eventually led to the Disneyland Forward expansion plan that gave Disney more zoning latitude in terms of how they developed their remaining land in Anaheim. And Measure L, with the cost of living adjustments placed on Disney, rose the minimum wage there to what it is now, $21. After some public scrutiny of pay, Disney also decided that mini roles would now start much higher than that. Housekeeping at $25.50, security at $25, and line cooks at $27.50. Most newly hired frontline cast members after 52 continuous weeks also now see a pay increase to $24 an hour. Tomorrow would leave Disneyland in September 2019, shortly after opening Galaxy's Edge to take over leadership of the Disney World Resort in Florida. And from there in 2020, once Bob Chapek became CEO, Tomorrow became chairman of Disney's Experiences Division. In overseeing the Experiences Division, he has pushed to include more robotic and animatronic figures in the parks, including droids moving through Galaxy's Edge, the Spider-Man Stunt-tronic in Adventures Campus, and the new Olaf animatronic that will walk through the world of Frozen in Paris. He has partnered with Epic Games to increase the functionality of Disney attractions such as Smuggler's Run. Despite overseeing attractions during various price hikes at the parks, most notably for tickets and food, he is reasonably well-liked by the fan community and at times rises to something like celebrity status. He's a regular speaker at D23 events. If you stay in a Disney hotel, you'll likely see him on your TV welcoming you to that resort. On Instagram, he has close to 170,000 followers. Aside from Disney, he remains a fan of the Boston Celtics, essentially his hometown team. He likes a lot of bands who are mostly associated with the 90s, that is, the years after he graduated from college, such as the Red Hot Chili Peppers, the Foo Fighters, and Oasis. He lives far from the studio in California, down in Coto de Caza, which is an exclusive enclave about 30 miles south of Disneyland. This gives him and his wife a strong sense of separation from his work life. And I'm guessing now with this promotion, there's the question of if he will move closer to the studio in Burbank. But I do think the big takeaways from his selection as CEO are these. His selection as CEO suggests that the board likely feels that the Experiences Division will remain the profit center moving forward for many years. We've explored this on previous episodes, and we also feel that this is the likely growth path for Disney. As a company that has a stronger and a more unique role in experiences than in film, TV, and streaming, though both areas remain significant. Tomorrow is also an executive who embraces the identity of the Disney brand more than Walden, which speaks to Disney's desire to continue to present itself as a lifestyle company in which its customers and fans feel that Disney represents something meaningful about them as people. Lastly here, my expectation is that with Josh's experiences in the parks and resorts, I do believe that this means we will continue to see increasing developments in the parks, which will be a nice change compared to where we were with Chapek. So in general, I think the changes here are a good outcome. And my hope here is that even after the honeymoon period ends between Tomorrow and Walden in their new roles, they can work together to collectively develop both experiences and entertainment in the years ahead. But that, I think, is the real big question to watch now. How well this leadership team will work in a year or two after some of the newness has finally worn off. In closing today, I know my voice is really ragged right now. It's been a long week, but I plan to be back next week with a new episode, hopefully to move forward our story of Disney legend Mary Blair. Also, if you've been listening to this podcast on Apple or Spotify or one of our many public feeds, we would love to have you join us as a subscriber over on Bandcamp. On iTunes and those other public outlets, you'll find 100 episodes. But on Bandcamp, you'll find over 400, including many multi-part series. I've been doing this show for over a dozen years now, since 2013. So there are near endless stories about the history of the Disney company on Bandcamp, episodes not available anywhere else. You can support us by becoming a subscriber at dhipodcast.bandcamp.com. I will also leave a link down in the show notes. So until next time, this is Todd James Pierce.